Holy shit. Oh my god. I am very sleep deprived, so if I look like crap in this video, you're absolutely right. Now you might be wondering, is he holding a small microphone while he has a perfectly working one right next to him? And the answer is yes. I'm trying something out. I'll explain it later. With the recent release of the first trailer to 28 Years Later, I decided to revisit one of my favorite movies of all time, The Little Mermaid. The Little Mermaid is a classic animated Disney movie from 1989 starring Jodie Benson. I made a video a few years ago talking about 28 Weeks Later, and it was during that video that I said the following. Good. Now, I could sit here and talk about everything that made 28 Days Later so amazing and such a classic for hours. Matter of fact, I really want to do that now. But that's not what this video is about. After all these years, several tens of revisits to the movie, and many horror movies ever since the release of that one, I can confidently say that my opinion hasn't changed one bit. 28 Days Later is without a doubt one of the best horror movies of all time. In fact, for my personal liking, it lands very comfortably at number 3, just behind, you guessed it, The Little Mermaid. I literally bought the damn thing from Amazon just a few days ago so that I can rewatch it one last time before making this video, and my wife got mad at me because during the whole movie I just kept saying, such a great movie. And while on the topic of streaming, why is it that you literally cannot find this movie anywhere as of December 2024? Well, anywhere in the US, which brings me to today's sponsors, NerdBP. Wait, give me 1 second, guys. What's that, Mom? There's still no sponsor for this video? It's been years. What are you talking about? Oh, well, screw you too. I am very aware that art would always be subjective. Certain genres of music completely define generations, while older or younger generations find it insufferable or annoying. Same goes for paintings, sculptures, photos, movies, or anything that is made with circumstantial experience for the purpose of creative expression. However, I'm also set on the belief that every now and then you have pieces of art that are so symbolic and technically impressive that they're able to, as they say, pass the test of time. You can think of the works of Picasso and his paintings, Mozart and his musical pieces, Kubrick and his movies, and you might be thinking, does this guy really believe that Danny Boyle and 28 Days Later is up there with historical figures such as Picasso, Mozart, or even Kubrick? And the answer is, I really don't know, but I'm already way too deep in this analogy to backtrack. Now, what I'm really trying to say with this video is that considering the circumstances under which the movie was made and the ripple effect it had on the horror and zombie genres, it's hard not to see it as an absolute classic. Now, I know there's already tons of videos out there about fun facts of the movie, so I'm going to try to summarize the next sections as much as I can. So let's start with pre-production. First of all, you have movie and TV director Danny Boyle, who, although later on will be very famous for his movies, Oscar-winning movies actually, Slumdog Millionaire and other very popular movies like 127 Hours and Steve Jobs, was relatively unknown back then. Prior to this, his most favorite movie was Trainspotting, and although I have vague memories of ever watching this movie here and there are definitely not enough to claim that I've seen it or to give you a short review about it, but IMDb gives it an 8.5 out of 10. You also have Cillian Murphy, an actor that is nowadays regarded as one of the best in the industry. However, back then he was working mostly on independent short films and theater, and he was very much an unknown in the industry. Fun fact, you can find a lot of his early work on YouTube, and although the image quality is not the best, it's still pretty entertaining. Add to this an $8 million budget, which even for the time was considerably small. And it also explains a lot of the technical decisions that the crew had to make because of the very small budget. A lot has been said about the shortcuts that production had to take in order to save as much money as possible. But a thing that I've seen mentioned here and there is that production took a lot of these decisions because they didn't want to pay permits to the city and whatnot, which is not entirely true. The filming of the movie was done across London, which no matter how you look at it, you're gonna have to pay permits and you're also gonna need some police assistance. So, the hospital where Jim wakes up was a Monday through Friday only hospital. Production had to pay the hospital directly to film during weekends only. The scene where Jim is walking around desolated London also required permits and police closing, or at the very least heavily regulating traffic between 4 and 5 a.m. because the crew only had 1 hour to work daily for these scenes. The gas station scene, which involved a real-life explosion, required permits and it cost around 250,000 euros to get around. The famous tunnel scene, where they drive a cab and eventually get a flat tire, the crew got a permit from the city to also film only between 7 to 9 AM and they finished this scene within 2 days. Same workarounds, transit regulation, and police assistance was needed for the recording of the M1 sequence, the scene where they're driving to the military outpost. The scenes in the mansion during the third act of the movie were all filmed on the first floor, as apparently the couple that owned it lived on the second floor. One thing that I noticed every single time that I watch this movie is that the very last scene always looked at the very least twice as good as the rest of the movie. And at first I thought, okay, maybe it's my TV, or maybe it's my laptop, or maybe it's my computer, or maybe it's my phone, or maybe it's my eyes, or maybe it's my brain, or maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm dying. And then I learned that the entirety of the movie was recorded digitally, for the exception of that very last scene. This very last film is actually recorded on film, but we'll talk about it in a little bit. It is also the only scene in the entire movie that seems to be affected by my $15 purchase for the HD version of this movie. In all seriousness, the reason why this is because digital recordings cannot be enhanced the same way actual film can be. I'm gonna try and explain this as easily as I can, but since I'm not an expert, I'm gonna leave some links at the bottom of this video in the description in case you want to read a little bit more about it. Basically, during the filming of a movie using 35, 65, or 70mm film, the definition of the actual film has to be dumbed down so that it can fit in the VHS, DVD, or Blu-ray format. Meaning that the amount of information that is actually stored in the master of the movie is so large that up until this date, 2025, there is no actual way to look at the movie in the definition that is meant to be watched, other than watching it at the theater at the time of release. Which in my case, it's a credit that I cannot take at all, because at the time of the release of this movie, I was none other than 7 years old. And the only person that I've ever known to have watched this movie on theaters when it was first released was none other than my dad. Fun fact, I remember that when this movie was first released, my dad wanted to watch this so badly that we went grocery shopping, and inside the mall was a movie theater, and my dad wanted to go into the movie theater while we went grocery shopping. So my mom said, sure, just get it out of your system. And then when we picked him up right after, he told us that he was 1 out of 3 people in the movie theater, which looking back seems amazing and terrifying. On the other hand, when a movie is recorded digitally, the resolution of which is filmed has a hard cap, meaning that you can play with some image quality enhancements here and there, but the definition of the movie is already pretty much set on stone. The other releases of the movie, meaning VHS, DVD, or Blu-ray, can only ever look as good as the original master of the film, which in the case of 28 Days Later, and to give one of my almost non-existent critiques of this movie, is really not the best. For the purpose of this explanation, I'm actually gonna use the microphone on my shirt. How does that look? Think of it like this. When you record something on film, it's almost like having it in a big, beautiful container of apple juice. When you pass it to VHS, DVD, or Blu-ray, it's like moving some of this liquid into tiny little caps, like this. This is allergy medication. Don't think this is allergy medication. On the other hand, when you record something digitally, think of it as this little bottle of Powerade. The definition is already set on stone. No matter where you move it, it can be a small container like this, or it can be another large container like this. The definition is always going to be the exact same. I don't know if that made it any easier to understand, but it's done. It's funny because during my last viewing of the movie, I kept thinking that the image quality gives the movie a sense of being there with the characters. It's almost like 28 Days Later somehow manages to have a semi-found footage feeling by having the angles and the quality that it does. Then I started writing the script and doing my own research, and I found out that those were some of the main reasons why Danny Boyle chose to record the movie digitally over film. Apparently, the usage of digital cameras was not only to give the movie its rough and graininess quality, but also because it allowed the crew to film in angles that otherwise they couldn't have achieved with 35mm equipment, and the budget they had. Working with digital cameras also made it so it was easier for the crew to set up, which was very important considering the super short time windows they had to work with, as apparently it would only take them a few minutes to have a multi-camera setup ready this way. The official ending, which from I understand wasn't even the original ending of the movie and was actually part of the reshoots, which is the main reason why it looks in such a high quality, was one out of 3 different endings, one of them being completely different than the other 2. The official ending is the one that we all saw and the one that you should take into account when watching 28 years later. Jim, Selena, and Hannah are able to escape the mansion. Jim is saved from his gunshot wound by Selena and Hannah, and they're able to find a new home somewhere in the mountains. Another fun fact is that the words being said by the jet pilot are in Finnish, and they mean, "Will you send a helicopter?" So, in case you were confused about this for some reason, yes, the jet pilot did see them. Ending number 2 is pretty well known at this point as well. Selena and Hannah try to save Jim at the nearby hospital as well, but this time they fail to do so, and Jim dies in the hospital bed. Selena and Hannah end up in the same mountain home from before, and the jet pilot sees him as well. The third and final ending was not filmed for narrative reasons, as the crew ran into a lot of issues that they just couldn't work around, considering what we knew about the infection, as these wouldn't make any sense. I'm not going to tell you what this one is about, but I will leave a link in the description where you can see the storyboard being narrated. Personally, I still prefer the ending where Jim is alive at the end, and I do agree that the narrative of the movie wouldn't have made sense with this ending, but I do prefer it over the other ending, as it gets much more creative and it ties up pretty neatly with the very beginning of the movie. Another great thing to mention about this movie is the amount of inspiration that Danny Boyle took from real life events when developing the look of desolated London. Some of these scenes were even heavily criticized when it was first released in 2002, shortly after none other than 9/11. Nonetheless, I think it's worth mentioning that all these scenes were recorded prior to what happened in 9/11, and Danny Boyle did came out and said that had he filmed the movie post 9/11, a lot of these scenes would have just been cut from the final product. What came after the release of the movie was an undeniable wave of influence over the zombie and horror genres. While 28 Days Later was not the first movie to introduce all of these tropes, it can be credited as the movie that revived the zombie genre. Shortly after its release, a massive wave of zombie-related media came to be. So much, in fact, that a few years later, it felt like every other thing on TV or movie theaters was a zombie or infected movie. In fact, or at least according to Wikipedia, the year in which 28 Days Later was released, there were only 5 zombie/infective movies released. And 28 Days Later was one of them. But shortly after, everyone wanted to jump on the zombie craze. 2003 had 12 movies, 2004 had 20 movies, 2005 had 23 movies, 2006 had 27 movies, 2007, the year in which 28 Weeks was released, had 24 movies, and 2008 had 31 zombie-related / infection movies. Now in college, I was always taught that correlation does not mean causation, but it's hard for me to believe that all these craze was caused due to the Resident Evil franchise, considering how that went downhill real fast. What seems crazy to me is how a movie that on paper was on its way to becoming a flop, or at the best, just another movie of the year, ended up receiving multiple nominations and awards, tenfold its estimated budget, propelled the career of an Oscar-winning director, and launched the career of one of the best actors working today, and influenced its genre to such a degree. There is a lot to say about 28 Weeks Later, and I still consider it to be one of the best horror/zombie movies of all time, maybe, even though I would never consider it to be nearly as good as the original. But I won't talk about this movie here, since all things considered, it doesn't seem to be connected to neither of the movies. 28 Days Later doesn't seem to have any impact on 28 Weeks, and aside from maybe the very final scene of 28 Weeks Later, nothing really seems to have an impact on 28 years either. So that leaves us here, just a few months away from the release of another movie with the same good old director, Danny Boyle, and the same writer, Alex Garland. I believe Alex Garland is also confirmed to be the writer of the whole trilogy that they are trying to work on, but sadly it seems like Danny Boyle is only listed for the director of this first movie, at least at the time of me recording this video. I also don't know if they're taking into account 28 Days Later as part of the trilogy, and so they're only aiming to make 2 more movies, or if they're trying to make 3 whole new movies. I am very excited for this movie. However, as optimistic as all these news makes me feel, a decade of very disappointing horror movies that can't seem to let go of the same old tropes and techniques over and over again does make me feel cautious. This movie is also confirmed to be recorded on an iPhone, which I guess they're trying to capture the good old magic of digital recording the whole thing, and I really don't know how to feel about that. To be fair, I don't know how the final product looks like yet, so time will tell. I also can't help but feeling like 28 years later is almost like fighting an uphill battle already. You gather the original director, you gather the original writer, and the original protagonist from the movie that started all this, and now you have a hype train in which everyone is on board, and it won't stop until your movie is released, and either it's a great success or we're all dead on the floor. I don't think there's anything necessarily bad about this, but I will say that I've only ever seen a handful of movies that are able to meet these high of expectations, and so I'm just hoping and praying that 28 years later is actually one of them. Thank you for watching this video. I know it's not unpopular opinion to praise the shit out of this movie. It's an amazing film. And with that being said, I would really appreciate it if you like the video, if you leave a comment with your favorite fan theories for 28 years later. And just to explain the microphone real quick, I bought these set of microphones for a little project that I'm gonna run on the side. You will see more on this channel later down this year. But I wanted to see if it will make it easier for me to edit the videos, since a lot of times when I record from this microphone and that camera, it's kind of a hassle to synchronize the audio with the video. And so this should make it at least a little bit easier. So when 28 years later is released, I'll try to make a video on it. But until then, or until the next video, I'll see you later. Bye bye. And then it's gonna fade to black, and then all you're gonna hear is my voice. Bye bye.